what's going on, y'all? T-Bob here.
And Jake as well.
And you're about to watch a little OTB LSU.
We're going to give you all the latest, greatest between LSU football, baseball, women's basketball, softball, and everything in between.
Bottom line, if you want to talk Tigers, keep it locked, subscribe, like it, and we hope you enjoy it. Wilson Alexander had an article today breaking down Brian Kelly, discussing the need for the LSU offense to be more explosive and how explosivity does not necessarily, and this is weird because this is a point that sounds obvious and is obvious, but sometimes you can get so wrapped up in something else that you're thinking about that you miss the obvious, right? And it needs to be pointed out once again. And I'm probably guilty of this because when I've talked about explosive plays, I've talked about consistently, trying to at least prove that you can take the top off of a defense, right? And that freeing everything else up. And I still think that's true. I think LSU still has to be willing to take those shots if they have, single high coverage, one-on-one on the outside. Like, yeah, trust your receiver. Do that, right? But that's not the only way to create explosive plays. Before we get into it, a couple numbers that I found interesting that proves LSU's offense last year was, hyper efficient, Jake, but not very explosive. They were 9th in the nation with plays of at least 10 yards. So pretty damn good there, right?
Yeah.
But 41st in plays that gained 20 yards or more, right? So the intermediate short game, really good. Pretty steep drop off there when you're talking about the bigger plays. They were 15th in the nation in passes that went at least 10 yards, 59th in passes that went 20 yards. So obviously there's room to improve. What I found interesting is Brian Kelly was talking about maybe the path of explosivity, while it is somewhat being willing to trust your reads, take those shots when the defense are lining you up for them. It's also more, it goes back to what Joe Brady used to talk about in 2019 all the time. The guiding theory, just get the ball to your playmakers in space. And he specifically referenced 2020 Alabama, where Wilson went into it. But, Mac Jones in the national championship threw for nearly 300 yards. And it's like 240 of them. It's like 240, like the 260 came on balls that traveled less than 10 yards.
Yeah.
Because they were just setting up their playmakers. And now it's something that Jaden Daniels not good at, that he has to get better at this year, and he talked about it, is like leading those receivers into the situation, hitting them in strides, being able to place it so they can catch and run. But, this idea of increased explosivity and taking advantage of the wide receiver room doesn't necessarily mean just deep balls. You just go back to the very simple philosophy of, hey, let's just make sure that the ball gets in our best playmakers' hands with a little room to operate, which, again, sounds obvious, but for whatever reason, LSU last year could not accomplish it.
Yeah, you still want to have the stats that they had in the intermediate stuff. Like, you still want to have that, but you also want to have more explosives. And like T-Bob's talking about, like, if you go watch, let's pick Tennessee and their offense, why do they spread the field so much? Why do they play kind of that stack receiver position? Because it creates this space in the middle of the field, and they want their guys to get the ball on a 2-yard slant or whatever the play might call for, hit him in stride, let him go up the seam and make a big play out of it. And that's why you do it. That's why you spread the field, so you can have all the different throwing windows that don't have to be down the field. Did Hendon Hooker throw a good deep ball? He did, but it's not the only thing that he would do. They would spread them out basically all the way to the sideline. They'd stack their receivers, and the pin guy, he would try to get the attention of the corner. They would hit the receiver that was behind the point of the stack, and then he would just catch the ball at 3 yards and turn it into a 30-yard play.
Yep.
That was a big part of their offense, and it was very hard to stop because they ran the football enough. They were efficient enough. They had 2 rushers that were like both right at 900 yards, and people don't really mention that when talking Tennessee. So if you started to spread to match the spread, they invited that because they would just run the football, and they would run gap scheme, zone runs. It didn't matter. All of it was available for Tennessee and Josh Heupel, and that's what made them so effective, is because they spread the field. When you spread with them, they had the ability to run the ball. LSU has that ability as well.
Absolutely.
To run the football. So I would like to see it just like UT. It doesn't have to be. We're not talking about 30-yard passes, 35, 40-yard passes down the field. Now, can you hit some of those like you did in the Florida game? Yeah, you can. Absolutely, you can. But you also can hit some of those, hey, we've got a playmaker, give him the ball, let him make one move, and then go 30.
Well, I would ask you this, Jake. In keeping with the 2020 Alabama reference, certainly one of the reasons why those guys were so successful on that short game is because they were so hyper-athletic, but also Was it not because, like, Ruggs and Judy and everybody could just take the top off in any
Yeah.
second? And, like, so you couldn't just play them underneath. You couldn't necessarily stack the box because if, like, the second you got too close, then take what the defense gives you. They were going over the top and you were dead.
That's what you want to do. I mean, that's why you throw some of that short game too, is because you know eventually they start creeping up. They start creeping up. I mean, it's elementary. I do it with my 4th grade flag football team.
That's what I'm saying. It's all obvious. It's all obvious. But again, last year they didn't do it.
Yeah,
LSU
I
did
know.
it.
So, yeah, you keep throwing. You throw a now, right? You throw a hitch, you throw a slant, whatever it might be, and that safety, man, he's like, all right, I'm getting tired of this. I'm getting tired of having to come up and tackle this guy in space. You start to creep up a little bit. You start to maybe run too fast towards that screen, and then it's the screen that turns into the seam. And then all of a sudden, he's behind you, and then, yeah, that's what you have to worry about. So who can be that guy for LSU, right? That's going to be one of the big things to pay attention to. And that's another reason why we're talking like Aaron Anderson. Like, that guy can take the top off of defense. It's not just in special teams. What can he do for you? Chris Hilton, my gosh. It's
got to be him and Chris Hilton,
Can Chris Hilton certainly take the top off any defense? And so you have the weapons to do it. You just got to go find the right scheme, the route concept that you feel really good about that can get those guys open. And also throw enough of the intermediate game where you're really good to keep everyone honest.
Yeah, and that's where the tight ends come into play. That's where Mason Taylor, and then we're going to make that's going to be where they operate their role in the offense. And again, much like the explicable factors for LSU looking so sloppy game 1 of last year, you can see maybe why they lacked in such an obvious area last year where the timing, look, it's a new quarterback, right? The time between receivers and quarterbacks maybe not quite there. As they talked about, Jaden Daniels' accuracy wasn't quite there on a lot of those routes for where they need him to be. There was a lack of trust for when the defense did give you the ability to kind of probe and test deep a little bit. Jaden was, remember there were times last year where Brian Kelly was straight up like, we got to be willing to take some risk. Like Jaden led the nation in turnover-worthy plays, like in a good way, like the lowest amount of turnover-worthy plays, which is great. But at a certain, it's such a funny thing, man. It's almost like anything else in life. I think about chess a lot, right? Where it's like, or maybe it's even like forgetting Sarah Marshall, the do nothing. You got to do something. It's a needle of thread, right? Like, don't turn the ball over, but be like a little willing to turn the ball over. But don't do it. But like you have to kind of be willing to do it just a little bit, right? And so it's that impossible needle to thread that you just got to try to find that kind of happy medium. And look, it's been the entire focus of the offseason. So again, much like there's no excuse for this team looking sloppy in game 1, to me, there's no excuse not to execute better on these principles and do a much better job of getting the ball to playmakers in space.
There was no bigger example of Brian Kelly trying to get across that message to Jaden Daniels than the Tennessee game.
Yeah.
When the broadcast caught him like screaming, you have one-on-one coverage, throw the football, because that's what it is. Like in this league, in the SEC, Florida State's not in the SEC, but they're a SEC quality type team.
Yeah.
If you have one-on-one with your player on the outside, and when we say Sunday players, we're talking about NFL guys, you have that on the outside. If he is one-on-one with a corner, you consider that open because you're trusting in your guy. You're trusting that your player that is going to play a long time, make a lot of money playing this game, can go win that one-on-one matchup. And you started to see more of that as it went along. Still not enough. You still need to see more of that because LSU's always had special receivers. And you've always had the ability to, hey, we've got this one-on-one matchup. I'm going to throw it to the spot, and my guy's going to go fight for it and win. And you have to do that. You've got Malik, you've got Lacey, you've got Brian Thomas and Hilton and Anderson and all these guys that we're talking about that we think are going to play football for a long time. We'll trust that guy. You saw it at the end of last year after that Tennessee game, the middle portion. You still didn't see it enough, and that's what they have to work on.
So we'll see it. We'll see on Sunday if this LSU offense has accomplished their main goals from the offseason. Wow, Jake, what incredible takes.
I mean, those guys, they're just the best.
I think so. And if you think so, again, hit the like button, subscribe, ring the bell so you get notifications when we post every single day here on OTB LSU.